Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Malicious Compliance. In today's episode, can't park in my driveway? Okay, I'll block parking in front of your house. No late lunches, no exceptions. Forbid me to have a bigger apartment so that my daughter can visit me. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Can't park in my driveway? Okay, I'll block parking in front of your house. Many years ago we lived in a rental house in a cul-de-sac. One of the neighbors refused to interact with us because we were only renters while she owned her house. Whenever anyone parked in front of her house, she would demand they move their car because that was her parking spots. Well, one weekend we were having a birthday party for our kid. We had to double park cars in our driveway to accommodate the extra vehicles and avoid parking in front of her house. This meant two of the cars overlapped the sidewalk a little. We're in a cul-de-sac, kids play in the street all the time, so it didn't block anyone from walking past. Midway through the party, we have a couple cops show up. Our neighbor called them to complain because her daughter couldn't ride her bike on the sidewalk due to our parking. She could have easily gone around the cars and the cops agreed it was stupid, but technically it was illegal to park on the sidewalk and we'd have to move the cars. I told them we had issues with the neighbor when we parked in front of her house, and they said street parking is public parking and free for anyone as long as the vehicle didn't remain there for an extended period of time. Cue malicious compliance. We moved the double-parked cars to in front of her house, and from then on we always parked at least one of our cars in front of her house even if there was room in our driveway, and parked it in such a way to block any other cars from parking in front of her house. My parents used to live in a street where someone religiously policed the street parking in front of her house, being rude and aggressive, and threatening to call the police. Until my brother visited our parents. She performed her usual act, and he calmly told her that street parking is completely legal. She threatened to call the police on him. And he pulled out his warrant card and said, "Already here, madam. Is there anything I can help you with other than a complaint about completely legal street parking?" Only time we ever saw her speechless. That story would be hard to top. Why do people think renters aren't people? I own a rental house on a cul-de-sac, and my neighbor, who used to be my neighbor when I lived in that house, messaged me in August to ask that the renters not park in front of her house now, because she wanted her kid to be able to sled down the hill in their front yard in the winter. She hadn't ever even met them. I told her she should talk to them with a request, and that we couldn't tell them not to park somewhere they were legally allowed to park. Didn't hear from her again. I had a neighbor who always parked in his driveway but didn't want anyone to park in front of his house. He'd leave notes on cars, yell at anyone who dared park there, threaten to call the police, threaten to tow, you name it. Most people parked by their own houses, but once in a while, someone would have a party, which meant street spots filled up. No matter who he complained to, everyone basically told him he doesn't own the street. Eventually, he got the bright idea to put small, thin strips of wood with nails sticking up by the curb. Anyone pairing their risked flat tires. He thought he'd won until the day a police officer stopping in to visit a colleague took that last open spot for his police cruiser. 2 flat tires later, that angry neighbor had multiple citations for littering, creating a road hazard, and malicious mischief, plus a very public scolding from a very angry cop. The city I live in has an ordinance against parking a service truck over the size of a 1-ton truck in driveways in residential areas, but it's legal to park them on the street. I drive a big Kenworth service truck for work and park it in my driveway anyway because the street I live on is very narrow and it's hard to get around it when it's on the road. Most of my neighbors don't mind. There's only one busybody couple that lives across the street from me. They complained a few times, so for a week I started parking it in the street in front of my yard, which happens to be directly in front of their driveway. They were not happy with the new 6-point turn they had to do to get their cars in and out of their driveway. As a homeowner, I would never mess with renters. They have so little to lose, they could easily mess up your property or your experience living there and just rent somewhere else with no easy liability or recourse. We have a neighbor who has a third car she parks in front of her house for the sole purpose of not having anyone else park in front of her house. She keeps one in the garage, one in the driveway, and the one on the street. Only her in the house and never drives the car parked in the street. Just pays to keep the plates up to date and leaves it sit there. Where I'm from, you can't park in the same spot on the street for more than 24 hours straight. Not saying one could call the local parking enforcement on your neighbor, though. Definitely not. What's wrong with that, though? Is it run down or busted? Some neighbors do that. But it does not hurt anyone else. Telling someone they can't park on the street is wrong, but using an extra car just to be weird, let her do it. No late lunches, no exceptions. I work a field services job where faults are called in and are attended to within a few hours. Lots of driving, very unpredictable workloads with while you're here faults. Some venues can have as many as 300 machines, so it's not uncommon to have 3 to 10 extras mentioned on top of the original issue. Usually we would just fix them and not bother wasting the time having a call raised, processing it through our job system, etc. 2 extra minutes unaccounted for is more efficient than 2 minutes repairing and 5 minutes processing a job. I got into the habit of picking up enough work at once that I could reasonably expect to run out of work with 1 to 2 hours left at the end of my day. If anything went wrong, I'd have a buffer to get the work done by end of day, even if it meant skipping my lunch break. Typically I'd be taking my lunch break around 2 to 2:30 p.m. for half an hour, on a 4 p.m. finish if nothing went wrong. I got rebuked for taking lunch too late. Explaining the rationale didn't help. Policy is policy. So now, I take one job at a time instead of taking multiple logical jobs that minimize time spent traveling. I raise a call for every single extra job, even if it's a 1-minute fix. I down tools and take my lunch break exactly halfway through my shift, no matter what I'm in the middle of. This is likely going to result in venues unable to trade for 30 minutes longer in some cases. The end result is that I have no stress on me because I only ever have a single job behind me. I'll never get caught at the end of the day with work left undone. I waste more time raising new jobs, reducing the actual number of fixes I get done each day, but my stats will look like they've doubled. And of course, my meal breaks are exactly how they asked them to be. I'm happier through the course of my day than I've been in a long time. Edit, for clarity, I do not work in the US. Breaks are legally required after working 4 hours, but are not required to be taken at that time. The timing of the break is only limited in that it must not be taken within 1 hour of the end of the shift, so as long as it's finished by 3 p.m. on a shift finishing at 4 p.m., there is no legal issue. Isn't this delicious compliance? On account of the timely lunch break. This is not malicious. You are happier and stress-free. Sounds like that's exactly what the employer wanted. I wanted to say this too: an employer that prioritizes policy and employees' rights to breaks is a good employer, even if the level of productivity/jobs done slows. I mean, it's malicious in that work stuff is going to inevitably fall behind as a result of complying with their request. This is one of those rare cases where I have to back the employer. I'm guessing that a 4 p.m. finish means a 7:30 a.m. start. If you are FLSA non-exempt, then the latest they can legally give you your lunch would be 1:30 p.m., 6 hours from start of shift. They aren't being petty, they're trying to follow the law. Fortunately, I don't live in the US, so this doesn't apply. Our labor laws in my state require breaks after certain time periods worked, but the only stipulation about the time it is to be taken is that it cannot be taken within 1 hour of the end of the shift. Which means as long as the break ends by 3 p.m. on a 4 p.m. finish, there is no breach. I know how you feel, but work that goes unrecorded is work that didn't get done as far as metrics are concerned. And this is bad for a few reasons. For one, you weren't getting any credit for all that extra work, because management didn't know you were doing it. Secondly, had you quit, it would have suddenly looked like stuff was breaking far more often. which is the other reason for recording jobs done. If the company is not aware of how often things break, then they can't properly budget time or money for it, or buy sturdier parts, or make any decisions regarding the situation. You're working your ass off for zero credit, and they're unaware of how often things break. That's a lose-lose. The stats are what managers get graded on. So your productivity metric increased, making you and management look better. That's a win-win. As a union representative friend of mine says, the laws are here to protect you. Know them and use them. Okay, malicious enough. But, question, if they do this on purpose, would you praise this employer? You say you are less stressed and enjoying work more. And I assumed that your employer did not enforce this rule to make your job easier. But if they did? Why are the clients not raising calls? We call them tickets here. If they called in their own tickets, then you could plan your day for efficiency. Got to train them to raise that call or you are not allowed to help. No ticket, no service. Tickets are for metrics for the bosses to make fancy charts to see in a presentation on how effective and efficient your team is being. Without those numbers, what would the bosses get to look at and talk about? /S. Forbid me to have a bigger apartment so that my daughter can visit me. This obviously didn't happen in the US. Was told it would fit in here. The thing is, about 13 years ago. I've always worked a lot in the social field. That's how I got the following story with the son of a friend of mine. He was in the process of getting his life under control, own apartment again, registered at the job center, a Bendriel school in the morning. His main problem was his ex-girlfriend, together they had a daughter. In order to be able to have his daughter with him at the weekend, the Jugendamt asked for another room in his apartment. The job center refused the larger apartment since he lives alone. In the normal way, he would never have gotten the larger apartment approved, or only after a long struggle. He probably would have gotten into trouble with the Jugendamt, since he wasn't trying to find a larger apartment. That's how authorities are. There is one crucial trick that makes the whole system work for you. Authority against authority. That's exactly what I suggested to him. In desperation he declined, with the usual phrases, "It doesn't work, it's too complex, etc." Luckily, his mother was there too. She persuaded him to do so. So I have given the framework of the letter. Simplified from memory. Dear Jugendamt, I am happy to accommodate the desire to take a larger apartment. Unfortunately, my case manager from the job center refused me the larger apartment. Best regards. Son of friend. After writing, I drove with him to the Jugendamt and saw how he had put in the letter. It was late at night. The rest I only know from him. The next morning he got a call from the job center that he could look for a bigger apartment. The letter of approval will come in the next few days. I would have loved to have attended the phone call from the Jugendamt to the job center. Edit. Wrong title. Not. Forbid me to have a bigger apartment so that my daughter can visit me. Right. Forbid him to have a bigger apartment so that his daughter can visit him. According to my Google foo. This reminds me of the time I used bureaucracy against other bureaucrats. Lightning struck the power pole outside my FIL mobile home, destroying the power meter. The problem was local maintenance of those boxes was handled by one company, let's say TexCorp, but he got his power from a third-party company, Acorp. Suntex had no interest in fixing his power issues because he was not a customer. We begged and pleaded with him to let me help, but the only help he would take was using my computer to email Texas. After 2.5 months of him couch surfing between friends and us, he finally relented into letting me help. I called the PUC, Public Utility Commission, and forwarded the copies of all the emails going back 2.5 months. The email I got CC'd on basically said, "You, TexCorp, Have until the end of the day today to hang a new power meter, or we will start fining you 100k per day until it is done. He had power back in under 3 hours. Authority versus authority, nice. The only thing not making sense, a bendrial school in the morning. Is this sarcastic? Or an in-joke, I am not getting evening school in the morning? In Germany there is 1 Bildungsweg and 2 Bildungsweg. Bildungsweg are all the schools that you attend in the normal way. Bildungsweg are special schools where you can catch up on your school leaving certificate. Most of them are called a Bendrialschule or Abendgymnasium, and the lessons usually take place in the evenings, so that you can catch up on your school leaving certificate after work. However, these schools also offer classes in the morning, just like normal schools. Then it's a Bendrialschule morgens. That's how you do it. This isn't even malicious compliance, it's just compliance. You can't apply for larger, I assume public, housing if you live alone. Ensure one bureaucracy formally informs the other of your custody agreement, which results in another person living with you part-time. This whole story is just how to do the proper paperwork. Your friend went to evening school, a Bendrialschule, in the morning? His life really was messed up. Looks like OP cracked the code. Night school plus social worker equals bigger apartment. Well played. Could Jobcenter have replied, problem can also be resolved by denying overnight visits, so no need for us to provide a larger apartment? No, that would have gone to the judge. The Jobcenter has no say in paternity decisions. The judge would have tore the Jobcenter a new one for such a wording and reason for denial. Yep. Never tell an authority that you think they're wrong, tell them that a different authority has said something different to what they said. The main issue then becomes that they put the whole issue on slowdown, and you have to keep poking them every day to get them to start resolving anything, because they'll happily delay until you die otherwise. If someone is making custody decisions, that makes them judge-like in my estimation, and there are few things in this world more wrathful than a judge who's been told no. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.